Welcome to Let's Talk Democracy, the show where we have meaningful conversations on democracy. I'm your host, Tina Johnson. And each week, we're joined by people who are doing the hard work of building healthy democratic environments. With insightful guests, expert advice, and thought-provoking conversations, we dive deep into the heart of democracy. Whether you're here to learn or to get inspired, we've got something for you. Let's jump in and explore today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk Democracy. This is Tina, your host. Today we're going to be wrapping up season 1, yay, with our 12th episode before a much needed summer break. In this episode, I'm going to be answering some of your thoughtful listener questions, sharing what I'll be working on during the break, including some exciting creative projects, and giving you a preview of what's coming up in season 2. So for me, this has been an incredible journey thus far, exploring the systems, stories, and struggles that shape our democracy. I'm very grateful for your time, your curiosity, your commitment to being part of these conversations. It's really meant a lot to me. I started this off because I really needed a space where I could hold conversations with people that could help me see through all of the stress and the uncertainty that continues even today. Because I really believe that somehow in all of it, the overwhelmness and the stress, that it is much more productive for me, at least I find, to be forward thinking towards solutions. I just can't spend 4 years stressing out without having some way of thinking about what's possible. I wanted to circle back to a question that was asked of me regarding our first episode where we had Joe Holtz from the Park Slope Food Co-op. And the question was, what was the outcome of the Park Slope membership meeting on boycotting products from Israel? So I touched base with Joe, and he shared with me that a group of members successfully organized other members to vote for postponement of that agenda item until June 24th. So on June 24th, they will be voting at the membership meeting for the Park Slope Food Cooperative on whether or not to boycott products from Israel. So if you would like to stay updated on the outcome and any development, you can visit the Line Waiters Gazette, the Park Slope Food Co-op's official newspaper. You'll find the link in this episode's description box. And in other major co-op news, Joe Holtz will be retiring. He was the general manager and co-founder of the Park Slope Food Co-op, and he will be retiring on June 30th after 50 years of dedicated service. That's going to be a huge change for that space, but I know that he is looking forward to the next chapter in his life and the next chapter in the life of the co-op. So congratulations, Joe. Yay. There was a question I received regarding the election. And the question is, do you believe that elections are really effective at bringing change? And my initial response is absolutely, but. And the but would be that, one, I understand that change is slow. 2, I know that the system is flawed. And 3, without us having a replacement system, voting is the tool that we have as people to create power and to effectively move things closer towards what we want. In one of our previous episodes, we talked about bending the arc towards justice, a Martin Luther King Jr. quote. So I know that it can feel like no matter who wins, the same problems stick around. Inequality, climate change, corruption, racism. It's like the system's too big, too slow, or too rigged to really change anything. And in some cases, I know that you're right to question it all. And there are times when the system feels designed to protect power more than people. That this is a time that is exactly the feeling that everyone has. In the US, we have gerrymandering where political parties design the voting map to favor them. So no matter what, they will always win an election because they've been able to carve out a voting bloc that will always vote their party's way. We have voter suppression. It's a real thing where limiting people's access to the polls, to the ballot box is an ongoing process in the US and in other places in the world. And in the US, it's surprising because we love democracy, we talk about democracy, and yet we want to find ways to make it harder for people to actually have the right to access their constitutional right to vote. And money in politics, Jackie Patterson talked about that, that if we could get money out of politics, it would be a game changer. So these are all real issues, and they're absolutely weakening the impact of our elections, but we still have the right to vote. So they're weakening them, but they have not been 100% taken from us. But, here's another truth. Even if elections aren't like a magic fix, they're one of the few tools we have to shift power without violence. And I myself am not in favor of violence because of the aftermath. We can destroy everything, but in doing so, we destroy each other. That's war of any kind. And and if it's justified to fight a war against the system, when in the system you have the opportunity to change it through voting, it's something I really feel like until that is no longer an option, that there's no reason to resort to violence. There just isn't. The loss of human life is one that really saddens me, and I just think that if we push forward and really roll up our sleeves, that there's an opportunity for us to make change. And even with violence, it's met with violence. And so we're just continuing a cycle of violence that creates insecurity, that creates the inability for people to really have an opportunity to fulfill their visions. And we have plenty of examples of how nonviolent action has moved us further along in our process for democracy and more justice and equity. When we're able to push forward in a way that upholds the common human decency we have for each other's lives, the change that it can bring is quite big. Like when voters end an unjust law, when we flip a state or elect someone who brings real reform. Sometimes it's small, like pushing a city council to fix local housing or getting a school board to listen to its community. And sometimes, yeah, it feels like nothing changes at all. That doesn't mean it can't change. And I think that's the hope. We always can change the system that we're in. And oftentimes when we feel like we can, it's because we've fallen into that trap of believing that nothing can get better because we don't appreciate the things that have gotten better by the efforts of people pushing for change. And we heard a lot about the civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, gay rights movement, getting gay marriage into law for a community that should have had it a long time ago. So the key is elections work best when people use them. And then we keep pushing afterwards. I think oftentimes people think, okay, we voted this person in office. Now they have to do everything. And that's just not how it works. We have to be the ones that say we're going to push forward, get people in office we want there. And then we need to keep pushing forward. And it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot to do because it's exhausting. We all have jobs, we have families, we have things we want to do, we want to relax. But the reality of it is that the work begins once we get people into office that we want there to support them in what we want them to do to hold them accountable when they don't do the things we want them to do, and to actually take a vested interest in how we show up to ensure that our democracy works in an effective manner. But the key is elections work best when people use them, and then we keep pushing afterwards. And voting is just one step. What comes next is organizing, holding leaders accountable, demanding better policies. That's where the real impact lives, right? It lives there. So no, you don't have to blindly believe in elections. And I wholeheartedly support being actively eyes wide open when you're thinking about the policies and the politicians that are going to be responsible for governing the society in which you're a part of. Believe more in the people behind them, the people who are actually doing the work to ensure that elections are successful. And that would be the voters, the organizers, the young people stepping up, the old people stepping up, the middle-aged people stepping up. It's the movement builders. It's the people who really, as I said earlier, roll up their sleeves and say, hey, I'm going to do the heavy lifting to ensure that we're pushing forward and we're making democracy work because we want a governance structure that respects all of us. Because even if the system is flawed, people still have power. In each of our episodes, that has been a resounding, resonating, reverberating, I'm using all my R words, statement by our guest, is that people have the power. And the more we use it, the harder it is to ignore. And on June 14th, when everyone across the United States and across the world, there were many no dictator protests all over Europe in support of the marches and protests in the US. That is a prime example of just pushing back and being in the street. That's one, right? Showing up and being there. And in some cases, you can't show up. So maybe there's mutual aid we've heard quite a bit about, or you are helping design the posters, or you're providing resources like water or food. You're calling your senator or your congressperson. You're lining up to volunteer for a campaign. The power is there within the reach of people. And the more we use it, as I said, the harder it is to ignore. There's a quote by Winston Churchill. I know it's antiquated, but it's still a really good quote. Many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for those other forms that have been tried from time to time. The next question was, what if you don't believe in the candidates at the national level? Honestly, when we look at the ballot and think, is this really the best we can do? I mean, this was something you kept hearing in this last election cycle in the US with Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And then you had Kamala Harris who came in and this topsy-turvy up and down because everyone was frantic and beside themselves with the options that they had before them. Two old white guys was one of the phrases I heard. And then you had Kamala Harris, who wasn't prepared, against Donald Trump, who has 47 indictments. The reality of it is that there are many people who feel like this. Is this really the best that we can do? And sometimes national politics feels more like a game played by people with money, connections, and carefully crafted messages. That's what it's become, right? And it can feel disconnected from real life, from your life. And that's also something that many people have said, that they don't feel that their life struggle, who they are, is represented in the national political framework. And here's the truth, voting isn't always about picking your hero. I often say that for many people, voting is an emotional thing. It doesn't mean you can't have emotion, but when we're picking people that we like and ignoring the policies that affect our lives, we kinda get screwed. We really do, and I think right now many people are having buyer's remorse with Donald Trump. Probably not enough people, but many people. Sometimes it's more about choosing the person you think will do the least harm or the one who is most likely to listen when people speak. And that might sound like a really low bar, but in reality, the system of democracy, when you have to choose candidates or choose a party, you should be looking at the things that, and from my perspective, encapsulate what it means to be part of a democratic society, which means that we should be building towards equity and fairness for all, justice for all. And if you were voting for people who want to take that away from us, limit who has access to that fairness, to that justice, to that equity, to that governance structure that enables us to push with our power to make it better. Voting for the lesser two evils is more about voting for the person you can have the most influence over, to pressure, to put forward your ideas and thoughts that make them go even further than they themselves want to do. And that traditionally has been the case in the US in particular. Maybe not in other democracies, but in the US that has been the case. And it doesn't mean that we're settling. It means staying in the fight long enough to demand better, right? Because real change, it takes time and it takes pressure. And ideally, it should just be, hey, this is wrong, let's fix it. But that's not how the world works. Unfortunately, it's not how it works. So with the democratic system, we do have the chance to push forward, to make real change, and to apply pressure. If the national stage doesn't inspire you, and I know it doesn't inspire many people, you can shift your focus to local elections. City councils, school boards, mayors, district attorneys, these positions shape your community every single day. When you think of judges, for example, in the US, you vote for judges in the local municipalities for the most part. I think it's only federal judges that are appointed. But if you vote for the judge that sits in the courthouse where you're going to end up going maybe for a traffic ticket or for some misdemeanor issue that you had, but that it's a local judge, someone that you vote for, someone that lives in your community, that's going to effectively alter your life in one way or the other, and you have that choice to vote for them, and you choose not to vote for them, and you get someone in that office who really isn't about trying to find fair and equitable ways to distribute justice or to mete out the law or to find ways to use the law in order to improve someone's life or allow them a second chance. You, in essence, are saying, I'm okay with whoever sits on that bench who's going to alter my life, probably not in the best way possible. And so when I hear people say that they're not going to vote for local elections, I'm like, uh, do you understand how much power you're giving up by not voting in local elections, by not being present in the community where you're going to be directly impacted? Because it's a different ballgame, right? The federal government is the federal government. It oversees the federal needs, but your local government is what oversees your direct needs or your needs more directly. A lot of national leaders start at the local level. So it's likely that if you are engaged at the local level, you can help someone who you think fulfills their role at the local level in such a way that they can be a person, a candidate that you would be more likely to support and vote for to go into the federal government to do the things that you believe they can do because they've shown that they're capable of doing it. So that means you can help shape the future. I mean, starting small and starting now, you could do that. Also, if you don't see a candidate you believe in, support someone who shares your values. Volunteer, organize, or one day run yourself. I ran for public office. I lost, but I ran because I was sick and tired of complaining about this one state rep in Pennsylvania. And I thought to myself one day, I'm either going to stop complaining about this guy or I'm going to do something. And he was an incumbent of, I think, 20 years. And I said, well, I'm definitely not going to start complaining about him. So I'm going to run against him. And I did that. This is the first primary in Chester, Pennsylvania. Even though I lost that election, what happened after that was that there's been a primary contender for almost every single race in that community. And so I didn't win, but my running made it possible for people to see it's okay to engage in this process. You can run for office. You can effectively make change. So I think that that also is part of this, is that winning office would be great, but showing an active process of engagement. I personally believe that there should never be an election that doesn't have a challenger against a sitting incumbent. I don't care how long they've been there. I think that that's the power of accountability. If they know someone's willing to run against them, even if you don't have a snowball's chance in hell to win, that they know that they can be replaced because they can. They're public servants. It's not a guaranteed job. It's a privileged job that voters give. I think it's also important to remember that democracy isn't just about believing in candidates. That's the other thing. It's like we get a candidate and we're like, okay, it's like Jesus walking on water or something. That's not how it is. It's not the candidate that you should believe in. It's about believing in your power to push for something better, even when the choices aren't perfect. And I think people, again, get so bogged down in what the candidate isn't doing. It's just like, but what are you doing? What can you do? How can you push this forward? So if you're frustrated, I encourage you, stay engaged, stay curious, stay loud, because change never happens from the sidelines. Never, 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 ever, ever, ever. There was another question from a listener. How do you avoid the elites from getting too powerful? And are there any historical references to look to? Well, let's be honest. Every system has its elites, whether it's billionaires, political dynasties, military leaders, media moguls. Power tends to concentrate unless something pushes back. So the real question isn't whether elites exist. It's how do we keep them from controlling everything? In healthy democracies, the answer comes in 5 key tools. We'll use that word. Checks and balances, no one person or group controlling everything. The legislative, executive, and judicial branches keep each other in check, right? That's the way it should work. A free press, journalists expose corruption, follow the money, and ask the hard questions. Fair elections. If you don't like the people in power, you vote them out. Active citizens, protest petitions, watchdog groups. This is the power of people keeping elites accountable. Laws that limit influence. Think anti-corruption rules, campaign finance reform, and open government laws. But these only work when people use them. I mean, again, it's democracy. If we don't use it, it doesn't work. If we don't use these tools, it doesn't work. So let's take a look back. We can look at ancient Rome. Elites in the Senate gained so much control that the Republic fell and paved the way for emperors like Julius Caesar. Fast forward to the US in the early 1900s, powerful business elites like Rockefeller, Carnegie were nearly untouchable until progressive era reforms broke up monopolies and gave workers more rights. And in more modern times, countries like Sweden or Norway have created systems where wealth is taxed fairly and government is transparent, keeping elite influence in check without silencing success. History shows us power tends to concentrate, but it can be controlled. That's where democracy comes in. Democracy isn't flawless. It's slow. It's messy. sometimes frustrating, but when it works, it gives people real power, not just elites. I remember that point that was made by Jim Boyce in our conversation on economics and democracy. Here are key differences between a democracy and dictatorships. When a democracy breaks, it often cracks. When a dictatorship breaks, it often shatters. In a democracy, you've got the tools to fix things. We can vote, we have the courts, protest, public debate. In authoritarian regimes, you usually get chaos, violence, or military crackdown when things go wrong. No peaceful transition, no voice for the people. And when you look at California and what's going on there with the Trump administration sending in the California National Guard against the will of the governor there, you would be right to say it's authoritarian. But the reality of it is that, no, it's not. It's a president using tools of an authoritarian. But in the democracy of the U.S., the tools to fix it are votes, courts, protests, public debate. And so those levers need to be pulled. They need to be used. So when you think of countries like Libya or Syria, where the collapse of autocratic governments led to civil war, now compare that to democracies in South Africa, which used negotiation and elections to move away from apartheid. It was not a peaceful process. There was a lot that happened. We're not going to sugarcoat it. But the road to that was ongoing negotiations and elections. People lost their lives. It was violent. There were many things that took place. But the government didn't collapse. The tools were used to repair it. Or if you look at Germany, which rebuilt itself after dictatorship and now protects democratic values strongly. So no, it's not that democracy never breaks. It's that when it breaks, it's easier to fix. So if you want to stop elites from controlling everything, which I'm all for, and if we want a system that can adapt when things go wrong, democracy gives us the best shot. But there is a catch, right? Democracy doesn't work on autopilot. It needs people. It needs watchdogs. It needs voters. It needs you. Because the moment we stop participating, the moment we tune out, that's when power fills the vacuum. That's when elites take over. Another question that came in was, what are the different forms of how societies are organized? And which one is the best form of modern society? Well, societies can be organized in several ways based on how power is distributed and decisions are made. The main forms include democracy, which we've talked a lot about, autocracy or dictatorship, monarchy, oligarchy, theocracy, tribal or clan-based systems. And most experts would say or agree that democracy is the best fit for modern, diverse societies because it allows for representation of many voices and interests, protection of individual rights and freedoms, peaceful transfer of power through elections, accountability of leaders through laws and institutions, flexibility to adapt to new challenges and ideas. There's no perfect system. Democracy balances power with participation, making it the most resilient and just way to organize large, complex societies today. Another question that came in is, what is the most effective form of democratic process? Well, the most effective democratic process is one that ensures broad participation, transparency, fairness, and accountability. Democracy takes many shapes. There are some key features that make the process more effective. Free and fair elections. Everyone has the right to vote without intimidation or discrimination, and elections are conducted transparently to reflect the true will of the people. Representative democracy with strong institutions. Citizens elect representatives who make decisions on their behalf. And these representatives are held accountable through checks and balances like independent courts and legislatures. Rule of law. everyone, including leaders, must follow the law. This protects citizens' rights and prevents abuses of power. And when we allow politicians to abuse power, we are, in essence, saying it's okay for them to take our power. Freedom of speech and the press. People can openly discuss, criticize, and debate ideas without fear, which helps inform voters and hold leaders accountable. And the last one would be civic engagement beyond voting. Democracy works best when citizens stay involved between elections through activism, public consultations, and community organizing. So there's some low-hanging fruit for those who are so busy to engage with this active participation. And because when we aren't actively engaged, we're saying it's not important. And when we leave a gap, the elites take over and they fill that gap and they take our power. Examples of effective democratic processes would include proportional representation systems, which allow diverse voices in legislatures, independent electoral commissions that ensure fair elections, transparent government practices, and open data to build trust. The most effective democratic process is one that encourages meaningful participation, protects rights, and builds trust between the government and its people. When these things do not happen, then what we're creating is an ineffective democratic process. That's an ineffective way of governing, and we are undermining the democratic values that people need to have in place in order to feel that democracy is strong. I think that this question can be summarized by a quote from Chinua Achebe, the Nigerian author of Things Fall Apart and other fantastic literary works. He says a functioning, robust democracy requires a healthy, educated, participatory fellowship and an educated, morally grounded leadership. I want to thank the listeners for sending in such great questions for me. They were thoughtful and very provocative, and I look forward to receiving more questions and continuing the discussion on democracy. Thanks for joining. Let's Talk Democracy is heading into a summer break, and we'll be back on August 12th to kick off Season 2 with some powerful conversations. We'll be exploring the radicalization and historical context of democracy, taking a look at international perspectives and the real-world complexities of democratic systems, and diving into the intersection of democracy and issues like migration. I can't wait to return and share these rich and timely discussions with you. During this break, I'll be focusing on my creative practice, finishing my second poetry collection, working on the first draft of a book centered on migration, doing some painting, handling much-needed administrative tasks, and most importantly, taking time to decompress, restore my energy, and care for my physical, emotional, and mental well-being. As Audre Lorde reminds us, self-care is not self-indulgence. It's an act of political warfare. It's how we stay whole so we can show up fully for our communities. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Take good care, enjoy your summer, and I'll talk to you soon.